Today we're going to talk about something that's become a dangerous, permanent part of the American prison system, this practice of cramming two people into a cell that was only ever built for one.
So, here's the big question. Is this actually a good idea? Well, it really depends on who you ask. If you're looking at it from a purely numbers on a spreadsheet budget perspective, you might call it a necessary evil. But if you ask the people living in those cells, or the experts who study this stuff, they'll tell you it's an absolute, undeniable disaster.
To get how we ended up here, you kind of have to see where it all started. It's pretty wild, actually. The original idea for American prisons way back in 1829 was based on this Quaker philosophy of one prisoner, one cell. The whole point was to give them solitude, to reflect, to find penitence. Today, well, it couldn't be more different. And this wasn't some new, brilliant idea. It was a complete and total logistical failure. The system just broke.
All right, let's start by zooming in on that one tiny space, a 6 by 8 foot box where this whole crisis really begins.
So for more than a century, single cells were just the standard. That was the way it was done. But then the 1970s hit, and the U.S. prison population just exploded. They simply could not build new prisons fast enough. So what was the cheapest, fastest fix? Just weld another bunk to the wall. It was supposed to be a short-term patch, a Band-Aid. But here we are decades later, and that Band-Aid has become a permanent, festering crisis.
And look, the key thing to get here is that this isn't just about being a little cramped or uncomfortable. This practice causes real, predictable, and severe harm. We're talking about a triple whammy: way more violence, terrible declines in mental health, and diseases that spread like wildfire. It's measurable harm, plain and simple.
This quote gets at a really critical idea: defensible space. Think about it. A space that's yours, where you can have a moment of peace, where you feel safe. Now, what happens when you take that away? When you're locked in a tiny room with another person 24/7, there is literally no escape. That cell becomes the hotbed for extortion, for assault, for rape, especially at night when there's less supervision. A single cell is the single greatest protection against that kind of violence.
And this isn't just theory. The numbers are grim. 21%. That's the share of male inmates who are physically assaulted in just a 6-month window in these kinds of mixed housing situations. That's 1 in every 5 people. When you force people together like that, conflict isn't just possible, it's practically guaranteed.
Okay, so the problem starts in the cell, but it sure doesn't end there. It radiates outward, especially when the simple need to find an empty bed starts to trump basic common sense and safety.
This table lays out the core danger perfectly. Because of all the overcrowding, you get these disastrous pairings. You take a first-time, non-violent offender, someone focused on keeping their head down, doing their time, and getting out, and you lock them in a tiny box with a violent inmate serving a life sentence. One person is trying to get home, the other has absolutely nothing to lose. It's a perfect storm for predation.
And yeah, we can actually measure how dangerous that mix is. Those non-violent inmates, their risk of being assaulted skyrockets by 2 to 3 times when they're housed with hardened offenders. They're basically forced to learn a whole new code of violence just to survive day to day.
And here's the part that should honestly terrify everybody. This doesn't stay inside the prison walls. Instead of rehabilitating people, these places have become what experts call gangster universities. People go in for a minor offense and come out with a master's degree in criminal behavior. And the proof is in the pudding. Their chances of reoffending after release jump by up to 30%. So we're not just failing to fix the problem, we're actively making people more dangerous, which makes all of us less safe.
Okay, now this is where the story takes a turn, and it gets a lot closer to home than you might think. There's a critical difference here that most of us miss, and it shows how this system can pull in just about anyone.
So, we all tend to use the words jail and prison like they're the same thing. They're not. They are worlds apart. And this difference is everything. Prisons are for convicted criminals serving long sentences. Jails, on the other hand, are local, and crucially, they hold people awaiting trial. People who have been arrested but have not been convicted of a crime. Under the law, they are presumed innocent.
And I want you to get ready for this number because it is absolutely mind-blowing. On any given day in this country, 70% of the people sitting in our local jails are pre-trial detainees. Let that sink in. That's almost 500,000 people locked up in these dangerous, overcrowded conditions who are legally innocent.
So this leads to a pretty chilling question, right? Does this mean that any of us could actually find ourselves in one of these cells while we're still presumed innocent?
The answer is a hard, unequivocal yes. A case of mistaken identity, a false accusation from someone with a grudge, or simply not being able to scrape together a few $100s for bail, that is literally all it takes. That's the razor-thin line that can land any citizen in these exact same conditions. This is not some abstract problem for other people. This could be anyone.
So if the system is this broken, this dangerous, and it could literally happen to anyone, why isn't this front-page news every single day? Why aren't we all demanding change?
Well, it seems to boil down to a few key things. First, there's the powerful other mentality, that little voice in our heads that says, "Oh, that'll never happen to me." It creates a huge empathy gap. Second, if you have a loved one who's locked up, your one and only mission is to get them out. You're not focused on fixing the whole system, you're just fighting for your family. And honestly, can you blame them? And finally, you've got politics. Let's face it, tough on crime looks a lot better on a campaign sign than let's advocate for humane jail conditions. It's just an easier political win.
But here's the thing to remember. We are not powerless here. Not even close. There is a crystal clear line of accountability. Our local city and county jails, they're run by the mayors and sheriffs we elect. State prisons, managed by the governors we elect. And federal prisons fall under the president. We elect every single one of them. The power, ultimately, comes back to us.
And this really puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? It's a tale of two completely different priorities. On one side, you have some people spending absolute fortunes on elite lawyers to make sure they never see the inside of a cell. But on the other, you have philanthropists investing in fixing the system for everyone. And guess what? It works. That same kind of money, when it's put into reforms, has been shown to cut pretrial detention by 40% in some places.
Which brings us right here to the final and maybe the most important question. The lines of power are clear. The dangers are documented. The fact that this system could trap any one of us is undeniable. So the only real question left is, why aren't we asking the very people we elect to go and fix it?